Are red flag laws the way to protect the public from mass shootings, or a violation of your right to bear arms? That argument headed to the State House. Plus, what would you call a lawsuit where state judges sue state lawmakers for more money in the judge's own court system? The Kansas Attorney General weighs in. And Kansas finances are looking good. For now. That's what we're talking about right now on Kansas Week. I'm Pilar Pedraza, and this is Kansas Week. You're paying more in state taxes, from income and sales taxes to property taxes. More than predicted, that is, even with a recent increase in that prediction. The state of Kansas collected nearly $39 million more in taxes than expected this last December. That's according to the state's Department of Revenue. That makes now 11 months out of the last 12 that the state has collected more than it expected. A total surplus of $51 million. The trend of larger than expected tax collections continued in December, even though in November, the committee of economists and state officials who set the predictions raised that expected amount. And joining me on the desk this week to discuss this and more, we have State Representative Blake Carpenter, Republican from Derby, and State Representative Tim Hodge, Democrat from Newton. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Good to be here.
So, Blake, I'm going to start with you on this. Good news or bad news, what we're seeing with the revenue situation in Kansas? Certainly it represents more affluence because people are spending more money.
Well, I think that, whenever you see the government take in more money, you just have to remember that that's money that could have been, I think, kept in people's wallets, because we're taking in more than what we projected to take in. Now, my colleague here probably won't agree with me, but under all of the measures that we look at for a good economy, the Trump economy is rolling strong. And I don't think that there's any recession on the near horizon for the future.
Okay. Tim?
Well, yeah, it's amazing what a tweak in the law will do from that 2017 session that rolled back the Brownback experiment, where you had business owners paying zero income tax. And to pay for that cut, what they did was raise sales tax, property tax, all kinds of fees on all services the government provides, and basically passed those tax breaks for wealthy folks down to just working class folks, and it hurt a lot of folks. It makes it more expensive to live in Kansas towns. Your utilities are higher, your sales tax is higher, your property tax is higher. And so now that we have reversed that experiment, got rid of Brownback, got rid of his silly tax experiment where he was literally playing with our lives, we have these surpluses. And now it's time to balance this out and go for a reduction on food sales tax. I mean, it would be great, July 1, if we could cut the food sales tax in half, because the money is there. None of these corporate giveaways, none of these corporate tax breaks that they've tried to put on the books at the end of 18, end of 19, we need to give it in the form of putting it back into, like what my colleague said, back in people's wallets in the form of food sales tax reduction. We're almost the highest food sales tax collector in the nation, second to Mississippi. And so what we can do is give it back to everybody, not just some folks, not just the people who know how to file the return or file the reduction or file all that stuff. We got to give it back to everybody.
Okay. So, man, you got the attorney thing down. You can talk for long periods of time there, can't you? Take up all the time. Ooh. No, anyways, but...
Well, I'm right.
No, I don't know about that. But the thing is that if you look at the overall budget, yes, taxes were increased in 2017. It was the largest tax increase in Kansas history. And yes, it fixed all of these budget problems that, we've been plagued with the prior years before that, because the legislature cut funding, but they didn't cut the spending. And so, but now if you look at our budgets, we've increased spending just in the last couple of years by $2 billion on top of what we used to have. And so that's $2 billion worth of increased spending. In 2021, we are out of money again. Even though we just passed the largest tax increase in Kansas history in 2017, we are spending it, just spending it. And so it's mind-boggling to me how we can take this massive surplus and just blow it all away. And now we're going to have to either ask for more taxes in 2021 or cut spending.
Now, my understanding was that the belief that we were going to, the estimates that we were going to be in the red by 2021 were based on before they increased the predictions of how much we would be taking in for taxes.
You know, the predictions are going to change over the next year, over the next 2 years. There's an election cycle between now and then. A lot can happen within that time frame, but I would still say that you're looking at 2021, 2022, that area when we are going to have to seriously look at the budget. And I doubt the legislature will look at the budget seriously in 2022, seeing as how it's another election year.
If I may add, the income tax is what is still lower than what it was in 2012. And so I just want to remind everybody of that. It's still at 5.75% for the highest bracket. It was prior to when this went into effect, it was 6.45. It's almost a full percentage lower. Still, you still have the highest sales tax. You still have property tax creeping up on these local governments. And for my Republican colleagues to say, you know, we're now budget conscious when they totally blew through every balanced budget, bottom line budget from years ago, and spent all that, and then for them to at the end of 2018 and 19 try to give it away to corporations versus the people that have tried to give it, the people who have paid for the Brownback experiments in the form of sales tax and the itemizer problem. And for them to give those surpluses to corporations, that was fairly disingenuous. Give it all back in the form of food sales tax and be done with this argument.
I think your comments are disingenuous.
I'm sorry,
oh my
Blake.
God!
You got to start.
The
He gets
state
to finish
stole
this time.
Money. That's all I can say.
So we're going to move on, but we are taxing. There is some taxes.
Tax increases.
Okay, there are some taxes also related in the next story, so maybe you guys can pick up there. We'll see.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so one tax in particular is on the mind of Kansas Attorney General as he looks ahead to 2020. Alec Gartner from KSN's Capitol Bureau explains.
Derek Schmidt is ready to get to work in 2019. First, he says the state needs to address internet sales tax through new legislation. The Department of Revenue decided to begin collecting internet tax earlier this year after a U.S. Supreme Court decision.
They and the state have been very fortunate that so far, knock on wood, nobody has filed a lawsuit against the state or the department challenging what they've done. But I do think that they are flying without a net. And it would be much, much better if the legislature will step up and write a law that we know is solidly defensible.
Schmidt says he also hopes the legislature will approve a constitutional amendment on abortion. This comes after the state Supreme Court ruled that Kansans have a right to an abortion. Justices also ruled that funding for schools was adequate in 2019. It comes after years of debate in front of the court. That's something Schmidt says he's hopeful can last into next year.
I'm hoping 2020 is the year that we don't have to deal with a school finance lawsuit, that it simply remains in limbo, and as the legislature and the governor follow through on their promises.
Schmidt can work with lawmakers when they return to session on January 13th. Reporting in Topeka, I'm Alec Gartner.
Now, when it comes to the school funding, I think pretty much everybody is in agreement. Let's wait and see and let that one lie for a while. Everybody I've talked to on all sides of that story seems to be happy that it's settling down for the moment. Talking about the taxes, though. I'm going to go right back there. The internet sales tax discussion to me, I find fascinating because I know for several years when I first started covering the legislature in the early 2010s, Senator Donovan that was one of his pet projects, was trying to get a law passed to increase internet sales tax collections in the state. So I find it fascinating that efforts to collect the internet sales tax are now controversial. And Tim, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. Well, I think as soon as folks started buying cars over state lines, and when you had car dealers be upset about them having a very high sales tax in Kansas, and let's say Oklahoma or Texas having very little, I mean, ergo the issue. And then you start seeing an Oklahoma tag or a Texas tag on our highways, you kind of know what happened there. Someone bought a car over state lines and brought it up here and maybe wasn't quite truthful on where they resided. So as far as the internet sales tax, I guess my comment and my hope and my wish is good luck enforcing that across this quilt work of 50 different states, because you've got providers all over the country. We live in a free country where you can sell goods from Indiana to Kansas to California, and it's just difficult to keep track of all that. So I think it's going to be somewhat of an administrative nightmare. I hope it can be done. I hope it can be fair to your Main Street businesses, but I just have a hard time. It's going to be difficult to provide the manpower to enforce it.
Interesting.
So currently, the mom and pop brick and mortar stores in the state of Kansas on Main Street are having to pay these taxes. And what the argument is that they're having to pay these taxes, whereas out-of-state resellers, internet folks who don't have a physical presence in the state of Kansas don't have to pay those taxes. So Amazon, they have a physical presence. There's a few others that do, but there's others that don't. And so what that law was intended to do, or the legislature attempted to pass a law similar to what the administration did, except for we actually reined it in. We made it within the guidelines of what the United States Supreme Court decision was, and it was legal. Where the Attorney General is talking about right now is he's not entirely sure that this is legal, and we could be sued at any time by any of these other states. And so that portion, though, was in a bill that the governor vetoed twice. And that inside that bill, it goes back to our last conversation about the supposed corporate welfare and benefits and all the other stuff that you're going on about, which isn't true. Because here's the thing.
Did you read the bill?
If you didn't charge taxes before, and then, next thing we know, changes in law, now we're charging taxes, that's a tax increase. And so what I'm saying is that the money that we're talking about came from the federal tax cuts, and the state of Kansas had to pass a bill to allow that money to flow to the population, but instead, Laura Kelly and the Democrats decided that, no, we want to keep that money in the Kansas coffers, and we want to use that money for other things.
Here's what happened in those two bills. You had three different issues in one bill.
All relating to taxes, so it's
right, exactly.
one issue.
No, it's not. It's three different issues. You have corporate breaks. You had 1 penny of sales tax reduction on food, 1 penny, and then you had the itemizer fix. And then you had some sales tax thing. The problem with that bill is you insisted on giving corporate welfare, and you held all these other things hostage, and you never could get a clean bill. That's all you guys need to do. Break it up into separate bills and see which one passes. That's all you have to do. You don't have to cobble these things together for your corporate donors. You can fix that by separating those issues out and giving everybody a chance to vote on each different issue.
It must be easy to be in the minority when you don't have to govern.
Well, good luck. You're not governing.
Okay.
You're not doing anything.
If you say so.
All right, we're going to leave that one right there. I don't think we're going to solve it here. Moving on to another issue that the Attorney General is watching. It was filed just a few weeks ago. Schmidt called a lawsuit by judges against the legislature unfortunate and probably not well advised. A group of state judges filed a lawsuit against state lawmakers in the Kansas Supreme Court last month in an effort to force the legislature to increase court budgets. Attorney General Derek Schmidt would be charged with defending the state in the lawsuit if it goes to court. According to the Topeka Capital Journal this week, he called the suit an unfortunately timed assertion of peculiar legal ideas likely to erode the frayed rapport among judges and legislators. The clash comes after a judicial branch campaign to convince lawmakers they were underfunding the legal system so much it was threatening and impairing the capacity of the judicial branch to administer justice. In an interview, Schmidt said he found it a bit disappointing that this lawsuit is happening right now at a time where a lot of us hoped for a fresh start. Here we are again with a peculiar lawsuit raising novel legal questions, which is ultimately about one branch of government asking a court to order an appropriation of money. And this does, in a lot of ways, sound a lot like the school funding lawsuits that we've dealt with over the years, except in this case, the judicial branch has to rule in a case involving the judicial branch. And I think that's kind of what has struck everybody who's heard about this from the very beginning. I know you certainly were commenting on that before the show.
I was. And how can you be impartial when you're, ruling on your own pay raises? But then also, this comes back to a point that, I've made before, which is why even have a legislative branch? If we can just let's just give the appropriation process over to the Supreme Court and let them, say what should be funded and what shouldn't be funded. Ultimately, with the school finance issue, I think that a lot of the Attorney General's comments there were based on what we've been battling through these last several years on trying to make sure we have a constitutionally funded finance and everything else. Well, since we've been putting billions of dollars into the school system, well, that means that the money has been taken away from other areas of government. Also, one of those areas being judicial pay and judicial non-judicial employee pay increases as well.
Yeah. Well, and certainly they've been lobbying lawmakers for an increase in pay for a while now.
Well, sure. I think when you hear the stories of court clerks that have to work 2 jobs, they work the full-time court job and then they go and work at a nursing home or something like that in the evenings. Or you hear that they're having to buy software that doesn't take care of all the issues, or lawyers that are having difficulty uploading documents on time. And you hear all of those different stories, and the court has done a very good job of just outlining why they are being underfunded. And we all take oaths as legislators to uphold the constitutions, and one of the obvious parts in the Constitution is to establish a judiciary. And we have to, when we establish that means we have to fund it. And so that you don't have amateurs dealing with high and complex issues in divorces, in child custody, in everyday problems that can really go badly. And the legislature holds this group hostage year after year after year. And it always boils down to this: well, you can't tell us what to do. Well, we need a functioning judiciary, and it can't be this thing where the legislature has this problem with the court deciding the education case. The court doesn't pick the case that it gets. The schools sued because we weren't funding them correctly. And so now the legislature wants to fire the referee and be the referee. And they can't do that. And this whole thing about a conflict of interest, being the court suing, or the judges suing to deal with the terrible pay they're getting, all you have to do is remove it to federal court and you've fixed that. There doesn't have to be this conspiracy theory by the other side that says it's a wrong lawsuit. They have come to budget hearing after budget hearing after budget hearing with their ducks in a row. That lower budget appropriations committee sees the issue, hands it over to the Republican-controlled appropriation committee, and they end up taking all the money out for the courts. It's ridiculous. And so all we have to do is understand that this branch of government needs to be funded because they're dealing with very, very complex issues, and you don't want unsophisticated people doing that. And that's what will happen if you have pay.
And you know what? You're right. We do need to make sure that they're funded. And the thing to me, though, is that I believe that they are getting very adequate compensation.
They're 50th in the nation.
They're making 6 figures.
Okay, they're 50th in the nation.
They are individually making more than the median household income. And you know what? Whenever we have a vacancy, boom, that thing gets filled instantly. And so you can't tell me that pay is not.
I don't know about that anymore. The lines for being a judge have shortened dramatically.
Okay, but you know what? There's still a line in order for the people to become judges in the state of Kansas because they want to.
All right, we're going to leave it right there. We are going to move on. There are other things to talk about. State lawmakers could find themselves debating new tobacco laws in Kansas, mandated by new federal laws many are finding confusing. KAKE's Eli Higgins explains.
As most of us know, a new federal law prohibits the sale of tobacco products to anyone under the age of 21, but after some confusion by both retailers and consumers, the FDA clears up some unanswered questions.
The biggest thing that we were worried about is the fact that we couldn't get a straight answer. We actually contacted the FDA personally, and the FDA actually told us, yes, it is 21 and above as of right now to purchase any tobacco product.
When the bill was passed, it was unclear how long retailers would have to transition to the new rules. Many were hoping there would be a grace period, giving them time to change policies and communicate the changes to their customers. But after confirming with the FDA that all changes are immediate, it was time for Jacob Campbell and the team at Big E's Vapor Shop to get to work.
We just just put this sign right in the view of the public eye as you're walking in. So it says adults only, 21 and over. Anyone under the age of 21 is strictly prohibited from entering the premises or loitering. The only thing that's changed on the sign so far is what they told us to do was to go ahead and put 21 instead of 18.
Even though the sudden change was a shock to many, some people think it's a good thing.
Less lung cancer, less children smoking and vaping maybe. Harder for my kids to get to it. That's for sure. They're still going to find ways, but makes it a little bit more difficult.
Campbell says he sees both sides of the issue, but his biggest concern is the effect the change will have on business.
I do believe overall it's going to hit the company pretty hard.
In Wichita, Eli Higgins, Cake News on your side.
And Blake, I'm going to start with you because I know you and I had a conversation last week about this and concerns that you have about the impact that this change will have on state law. And I'm going to let you explain your concerns about that.
So I've been trying to dig into this. I've been having legislative research look at it, just trying to wrap our arms around everything that this is doing. Basically what the federal government did was pretty much what they did back in the 1980s with alcohol. And they came in and they tied federal money that's currently coming to the state, that's coming to in the form of a grant. And they basically have said, if you fall out of compliance or if you do not comply, we will penalize you 10% the first year. And then as we go into the out years, the most that they can penalize you on this grant is up to 40%. And so that is money that the state legislature would be losing at that point. So that's why I think ultimately the legislature will most likely update it, the law to 21. I don't agree with it. I think that you're either an adult at 18 or you're not. And by bifurcating and making it to where we have different ages for different things, I think we need to just pick a standard age. If that age is 21, okay, well then make it 21. But then at that point, if you're going to serve in the military or be tried as a minor in the court of law, then that has to be moved to 21 as well. And so I would say that also I didn't care for the process of how the federal government did this as well. I believe this is a states' rights item because 19 states have already passed this, plus the District of Columbia. And so I think that Kansas should have had the opportunity to have this debate in our own legislative arena and figure out if this was something that Kansas wanted to do as well. And so by them taking that power away from the state, I just didn't care for that at all because it falls, in my opinion, outside of the Article 2, Section 8 of their enumerated powers. Well,
and there were certainly communities that were having that debate. Newton, your community, Tim, had already passed a law that was supposed to go into effect January 1st.
Right, and I by no means am a smoking advocate. Obviously, it is a harmful habit. It's a difficult habit to break. It causes health concerns. It's not good to smoke. We all get that. Mm-hmm. That said, I'm disappointed that President Trump would go this far and create this whole brand new class of criminals because it can really hamper someone's ability to get jobs, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. The other point is that it's the old point, you can get drafted to go to war, but you can't have a cigarette. And that's all I really need to say about it.
Okay, holy smokies. Him and I agree on something, ladies and gentlemen.
Why does that surprise you?
No, you're right. But no, I agree.
I get along with my colleagues.
I'm very disappointed in what the president did in this matter and Congress in general, but I mean, I completely agree with him wholeheartedly.
All right. Well, since you guys agree on that and it's all you have to say, we're going to move on. We've got one more thing to talk about today. It's called the Anti-Red Flag Law Act, and it would ban any law in Kansas that allows the authorities to take guns from those the state has determined are a danger to themselves or others. I explain why and what some local gun owners think about it in this story I filed with Cake News.
With all the little shootings and things that are happening, I don't know how much we have control over that, but it's like that would be a step in the right direction, I would think.
Tim Collins is a Kansas gun owner. He likes the idea of a law that would allow family, friends, or coworkers to warn police if someone they know poses a danger to themselves or others if armed. Laws like this are called red flag laws. Some Kansas gun owners, though, disagree. Representative Michael Hauser has pre-filed a bill for the 2020 legislative session that would, if approved, ban any such law in Kansas. It's called the Anti-Red Flag Act.
doesn't surprise me.
Before last year, only 5 states had red flag laws. Now, you can find them in 17 states and the District of Columbia. Many of those states have suffered mass shootings.
If it's something that's happened close to you or you've known someone, yeah, I think you'd have a much more personal stake in wanting a law like that.
Luke Cox is another Kansas gun owner who also supports red flag laws. In the wake of mass school shootings like this one in Florida, he believes public safety sometimes preempts constitutional rights if done right.
I think you'd have to have the wordage in there, or the stated known threat or threats have made or previous acts of violence. All that can be put into a bill or a law.
Some opponents, though, fear these laws are a violation of the U.S. Constitution, perhaps the first step toward ending the Second Amendment. Representative Hauser is among dozens of Kansas state lawmakers who signed a letter we told you about last October, asking President Donald Trump to oppose a national red flag law. Political analyst Dr. Russell Arbin Fox says Hauser's bill is written to prevent any such national law from ever taking effect in Kansas.
It gets very specific when you take a look at the language. It is talking about how no federal or state law could preempt the rights of people to own guns, even in the face of any kind of possible legitimate complaint that might be brought forward.
Now, what I found very interesting about this is, one, there is an identical bill in the Senate from Senator Hildebrand, who also signed the letter to the president on red flag laws. But what Dr. Fox was talking about at the end there, that this preempts any federal law that hasn't even happened yet. As far as I know, we haven't had red flag laws introduced in the legislature. This seems like a preemptive strike. Is that normal in your experience in the legislature, Tim?
Well, it does appear to be a solution in search of a problem. And so I understand the concern. I understand the desire to strike this balance between public safety and property rights. I get all that. I also understand that these types of laws need a crystal ball, a time machine, and a whole lot of other wonderful things to make them strike the right balance. Okay. I'll look for the law, but the other issue is, if you have the votes to enact an anti-red flag law, then you have the votes to undo a red flag law. And so again, it just seems like it's a solution in search of a problem. We have other things to talk about: Medicaid expansion, taxes, sales
and we'll
tax
have to talk
relief,
about them on
food
another
sales
show
tax,
because we are starting to run out of time. Blake, just real quick, yes or no, do you think there are enough votes in the House for this bill to pass?
I think that it could be pretty close. And there are other bills and laws that we have seen in the past.
All right, and we're going to end it there. Thank you so much. I appreciate you for joining this. And for now, have a great week.